Good morning and welcome to the Milton Keynes Business Channel. I'm delighted and honoured to introduce to you the closest that we have to royalty in Milton Keynes, Dame Anne Lynn.
Well, what an introduction. I do, in one of my roles, as it happens, chair the King's Foundation, which is a charity, a sustainability and arts charity where the royal founding patron is indeed King Charles III. So I do have occasion to meet His Majesty, but I don't consider myself to be royalty at all. But I'm very, very passionate about Milton Keynes, and I've lived here for nearly 38 years now. So delighted to meet you, Christian, and to talk to you.
So I shall very briefly, if my journalistic research, if Wikipedia is correct, and I know sometimes it isn't, your resume, principal of Milton Keynes College, First Lady to chair the Scouts Association,
Yeah,
High Sheriff of Buckinghamshire, heading up the Milton Keynes partnerships, all of the development in the city, head of spearheading SEMLEP, looking after the Milton Keynes International Festival. You managed and oversaw our application as the European City of Culture.
I did. And it was so annoying that I'm not being party political here, but it is a matter of fact that because the country voted to leave the European Union post-Brexit, that European capital of culture was withdrawn. So actually, Milton Keynes' bid, which was an excellent bid to be one of those
Oh, that's a
bidders,
shame.
was not able to be taken forward, and it was a real pity because, as you've just said, of all the different things I've been involved in over my time here, starting in education and then in the development space as far as housing is concerned, housing growth before when we had one of the, as it were, successor bodies to the original development corporation. It's called Milton Keynes Partnership. Being involved in that and chairing that, the international festival, which I we brought to Milton Keynes in the first edition was in 2010. I still chair that, and I'm still very much involved in that. Whereas the education and the housing bits matter to me, but I'm not directly involved in now. So it was a real pity, particularly as the leader of the council, newly elected at the time, now long-standing Councillor Pete Marlin, very much was championing and continues to champion arts and culture in the city, and as exemplified by the international festival, which we'll have this year. It was really galling that we never got the chance to be crowned it. But of course, we had done the Rugby World Cup before that, and we
Yep.
had done the application for the football FIFA World Cup, where we were chosen as a host city. Milton Keynes was, alongside those big established footballing legendary cities of
Mm.
um, Manchester, Newcastle, Liverpool, etc. But of course, the England bid for this was for 2018, 2022 World Cup football, which has obviously moved on now. But England's bid itself wasn't successful, but Milton Keynes' bid was. So anyway, I'm sorry to interject there, but just gives a bit of a flavour and a bit of the background on the sort of things. Yes, I've been involved in that you've highlighted.
That's it. You've also got 7 honorary doctorates, an
Oh gosh, I
OBE,
know.
and a BBA. Hugely impressive
It's
too.
it's more than a girl can cope with at once
So,
from level.
how did your early career start, and what led you to Milton Keynes?
Well, it's a great question, Christian. My early career started because when I was at school, I found I was interested in and good at languages, and I went to a school that encouraged me to do French and German, and that led to me doing a degree in French. And the height of my ambitions and my parents' ambition for me was to be a teacher. I mean, so the root of everything for me is education and lifelong learning, and the opportunities I had, I wish for everybody. Um, so after my degree, and I did research into well, Renaissance French poetry, which is hardly terribly practical or applicable to much in life these days, but that's irrelevant. I started teaching French. So in short, I became a part-time teacher in a further education college, which is often the way, teaching well, what we'd now call GCSE and A level, and then moved up very rapidly from part-timer to principal between 1976 and 1986, 10 years, just sort of developed my career in further education, really taking French into vocational learning. So I taught French for business studies, working in Buxton. I did French for tourism. I wrote a couple of French textbooks, and I polled up here in Milton Keynes in 1986, actually as vice principal, but very quickly became, at the end of that year, became principal. And I then was principal of Milton Keynes College for 10 years. I stayed as principal until 1996, and during that decade, developed the college significantly. One of the sites has now gone. It was at Wolverton. The other site at Bletchley is Milton Keynes College, Bletchley site, and the second one, of course, is still there at. But that had only opened in 1982. So when I went there in 1986, it was very new. So I came in through education, came here to be the principal of the college, and have stayed and lived here ever since.
And what was the key milestone for moving from education to leadership? Kind of transition from mostly doing education into general leadership and some of the other roles you had.
Yeah. Um, you just slightly dipped out there. I hope
Oh,
I didn't, but I
sorry, I
think
do
I caught the
apologize.
question about moving from actual teaching into leadership.
Yeah, I just wondered at what point did you decide to move from
Yeah,
education
no, I think it might
to
just be
leadership?
our connection because yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I didn't really consciously decide.
Hmm.
What happened is you start teaching, and then I actually sort of went up the career ladder, as it were, just getting a bit more managerial responsibility. I mean, languages in further education, it's even worse now, but it's not a big chunk of further education in the same way that engineering is, or digital, or sports science or something. But applied languages, as I've just said, for business or for hospitality, tourism, and particularly with French, is important. So I found myself being made a head of languages and then a senior lecturer actually in business and management. And in fact, I did do a diploma in management. And so I took on, if you like, managerial roles. And then I applied to be a head of department, and I got that. So I suppose that was the first leadership role. And interestingly, it was in Derbyshire at the time of the miners' strike, Derbyshire-Nottingham border, at the time of the miners' strike, and women kept that those communities going really. So seeing those women lead really, and providing them with some skills to develop businesses because their partners, husbands weren't working. Led me to think about, in fact, we actually ran a women in leadership course. Anyway, then I applied for a vice principal's job and I got it. And I think when I got into a leadership position as a young person, the biggest insight I had was that I'd probably done that unconsciously because my role models really were my mum and dad, who actually ran their own business. Just my dad was a butcher, and they had a butcher shop, and then they had a market stall actually selling cheese and dairy produce and chicken, but they did their own thing. They were their own boss. And because I'm also the eldest of two children. And so, as far as my sister's concerned, I'm the bossy one as well. I think I had models of leadership, which I then unconsciously applied in the world I knew, which was education. And I had, of course, had very good role models of teachers and head teachers. So it seemed natural, really, to move into a position which uh, gave me the opportunity and actually the power to do more good, to do things better, to shape things in the way that the college did then develop in Milton Keynes, and in fact has subsequently continued to develop. Does that make sense to you?
Totally. And was it, I guess it was a lot tougher being a female leader in business
Mm.
back in those days than it is now. Is that fair to say? Was it tougher being?
It is fair to say it was tough, actually. And there's another element as well, which is this is of course in the mid 80s to the mid 90s. So society was very different. Even in teaching, never mind in the workplace, you couldn't be openly gay. And not that I'm particularly openly gay. I didn't want to necessarily hide that, but actually, you didn't talk about it, whether you're a man or a woman, never mind being transgender. So yes, there was misogyny, definitely, both blatant and latent. You know, it was overt in some cases, and and much more subtle in others. But you know, I just kind of carried on really because I think I cared about what I was doing more than the fact that people would, you know, snigger behind your back or make insinuations or attribute what you were doing to the fact that you were a woman. You had to push through that. There are very many more role models of women doing things.
So, what advice would you give small business owners in Milton Keynes to scale up in today's economic climate?
Well, if they'd listen to me and accept that my only experience really of running a business or setting up an organization comes from the work that I've done setting up a charity, but I'll come back to that. But as I said earlier on, my own father was a small businessman, you know, had his own business. And I have been involved in my time in Milton Keynes with a number of uh, businesses that have started in Milton Keynes and grown. One of them started out as at Skills to Learn, set up by a guy called Majid Al Qadir, who had come to this country from Iraq and done his PhD in Cranfield, and then saw that Milton Keynes was the kind of place you could start and grow a business. And in fact, he's now developed that business, sold it on, and retained his hold in Milton Keynes because it's such a vibrant environment with research centres like Cranfield close by, and in fact he's got an AI company very much involved in education and in careers education and in equality, diversity, equity, inclusion work as well. So I know just from that one example of how if you've got a good idea, if you are sensible about the way you want to scale and grow your business, then this is a good environment. You can get skills, you can get people here as long as you treat them decently and pay them well. And another company I sat on the board of for a while, it's a company set up by three brothers, Aztec. They're still in Milton Keynes. They still are growing. They're developing. So I kind of know a little bit from seeing the proof of businesses that have grown. Um, in terms of my own experience and advice, I would say, look, I set up a charity because A, there was a need. So if you see that there is a need for a product or a service, then you test that out and you listen to the feedback. And if the feedback shows you that people want it or use it or buy it, then you know it makes. I mean, it's not rocket science, is it? But it affirms your own belief. Secondly, I think you have to have a vision. I think you have to know where you want to go, and I think you have to be courageous about that. And thirdly, I think you need to be both realistic and patient. It does take time to grow a business, to grow any organization. I mean, if I just look back at Milton Keynes College, the college I went to in 1986 to be principal, is in some senses unrecognizable now, 40 years on, because the size and the scale and the range of activity. But that has grown incrementally with the growth of the city, but also with the growth of the skills need. And that that sort of paradigm applies, I think, to any business. As a business owner, you can set the tone and the culture of your organization. And I think I did that in Milton Keynes. And then if you choose wisely how, in Milton Keynes College, I mean, if you choose wisely how then to nurture that organization, that company going forward, to keep something of the culture, but let it evolve and innovate with the changing times, then you get sensible, organic and managed growth. And I was actually talking to Sally Alexander, principal of Milton Keynes College, this week because we were at the same event together. And Sally is, in fact, obviously one of my successors. 40 years on, almost 40 years on, she's the fifth college principal. But my successors, the four after me, have all been internally promoted. And because of that, they have all, in their different ways, kept something of that culture and student-centered focus alive. So I think that brings in another example of another bit of advice vis-a-vis SMEs. Decide really what the ideal size for your organization is and whether you do want to scale it up, and then have a proper plan for how you might scale it up. And don't scale up for the sake of it, be in control of it in some way, but be clear about what, a bit like the proverbial stick of Brighton or Blackpool Rock, you want to run through the business you want to maintain, whether it's how you treat your people or the culture, as I say, or indeed whether you just want to make money, or not just make money, but actually, something takes off, you find yourself making a lot of money, and then have a clear exit plan. If you've got a goal to start something, I think about people maybe about 15, 20 years ago. I remember somebody in Milton Keynes who got into the kind of solar energy renewables. When people were kind of saying, "Oh no, it's too expensive," why? But actually, if you chose to go in at that right time, and you built up a business but with a view to kind of making a few million and then moving out, if you've got that entrepreneurial spirit, that's also, as far as I'm concerned, a perfectly legitimate goal and vision to have. And it just depends on what kind of personality you are, what your skills are, what kind of business you want to run, and the way in which you want to run it. But I think finally, for sort of micro businesses, single owners, small companies, the critical thing is just to be clear about what your goal is and maintain your management and leadership of the organization. Because if you take your eye off the ball, it can very easily go belly up, can't it? You've not got much fat, as it were, to live off. Most small companies tend to be very lean, mean, and agile, and you have to put a lot of legwork in, don't you? A lot of brain work. And so, sorry, just wittering on a little bit here, but actually, I think that having a clear idea of where you want to take the business that you've created is quite important. Think about the end in mind right from the beginning, and let it grow organically, but not out of control.
How would you advise local business owners? How can they keep learning and adapting with your background in business and education?
Well, I think they have to. I wouldn't want to dictate how somebody might do it because I dare say it'll depend on their own personal style of learning and operating, and the nature of the business, really. But most people set up a business because they have an idea or a passion for something, don't they? A bit like I was mentioning, I set up a charity because there was a need to address an issue where government had removed funding from students in FE going through to higher education, going on to university, getting degrees, and wanted to help them by giving them some bursary support. So I think you genuinely get people who are business owners, entrepreneurs, innovators, disruptors who are naturally open to learning themselves. That I don't think they have a kind of closed mind. The way in which they might learn, though, and perhaps the attitude to learning that they bring to the organization as it grows is quite important because we know that employers generally do not like to invest their own money in training and education and development and learning for their employees because there's a rather chronic British disease that says, if you do that, somebody will move out of your company, you'll have paid for their training and another company will benefit. I think that's very unfortunate. Companies, I'm quite hard line on this. Companies can't rely on the individual or on the state alone to pay for apprenticeships or to pay for training and pay for learning. It's got to be a much more tripartite sharing of, the individual putting something in, the employer putting something in, and indeed the state putting something in. And we seem over my 40 years in education never to have got that dialogue between learning and employers and government, whatever the government. We don't seem to have got that very much aligned. And every government comes in and says they're going to do it, and they don't. However, just going back to your original question, I think if you lead by example and you're open to learning, and online learning, just Googling something and getting it on YouTube informally in that way. There are so many ways in which we can all just keep our brains active and keep our ourselves open to the innovation that's happening around us anyway. So without formalizing it, I think most companies are alert to the fact that to stay ahead, they've got to keep their employees on the ball, and that involves investing in their learning and training.
And do you think young people could be better connected with entrepreneurial and business opportunities? Like, should they teach young people perhaps how to start a business? Like,
Well, I think there are programs that do that, aren't there? Young Enterprise and others. And yes, in principle, I'm very in favour of it, or at least encouraging that entrepreneurial, innovative spirit that is there, I think, in some people. It won't suit everybody, but actually, I think recognizing, particularly these days, where it's very, very clear that we, as a society, have a much greater awareness of and tolerance of huge diversity and inclusivity, which never existed. Look, I'm into my 70s now, although I still think in my head I'm in my 20s, but never mind. I mean, if you were a little bit odd at school, nobody kind of gave you any special treatment or bothered about it. You just kind of got on with it. I'm not talking about somebody with a severe learning difficulty, but these days we have, and I'm not criticizing this in any way, but these days we have a much more uh, deeper and nuanced understanding to all matters neurodiverse, from autism and ADHD to dyslexia and dyscalculia and the rest of it. So actually, very often a valuing of the different skills that young people have, so that there isn't just one way, an academic way, and that innovation, creativity, entrepreneur, risk taking, trying something out, bit creativity. That those are the things we should just encourage because they're there in the classrooms from nursery, early years to the FE college students in Milton Keynes College and in the universities. So I think we encourage that a bit more. So you don't have to force it and teach people, but you can kind of value it. And we have successful examples, don't we, of entrepreneurs who are role models for people. And we know how much young people now are affected by influencers,
Mm.
people who got into a business and made money and done good. And that's all. I think that's all very, very encouraging and much more healthy than it was in those, well, in the post Second World War years, that in a sense I grew up in as a child.
Are there any books that particularly motivated you that you would recommend to local business owners and leaders?
Well, there's the Bible, or the Quran, and Shakespeare, if we were doing it as a Thailand disc. I know that's not what you were asking, though. So I've never knowingly read a manual that told me how to be a leader. I am not knocking that. I did do a course at Cranfield when I first came to. It was really funny when I had my interview for principal of Milton Keynes College, and we were still part of a local authority then. I mean, colleges are now independent legal entities and have been so for over 30 years, but anybody under 40 wouldn't have no idea of that. But we were local authority controlled, and in our case, it was Buckinghamshire County Council as it was then for Milton Keynes. And they did this interview for me, and the kind of, this woman is this terrible stereotype of a Buckinghamshire chairman of a county council, but a middle-aged lady in twin set and pearls said to me, "Well, you're very young. Do you think you should do a management course?" And anyway, when they offered me the job, they said, "Well, actually, we want to offer you the job," which was lovely. But you think perhaps ought to go on a management course. Would you go to Cranfield? So I said, "Oh, of course. I mean, jump at the chance to go to Cranfield." So I'm not knocking learning from books, business courses, MBAs. In fact, I think there are some terrific ones around. But the best thing about that Cranfield course that I did was much more to do with learning about myself and my own styles of leading and operating, and in a way, what drove me to be the kind of leader I am. And I think you can read that by, there are a number of books about leadership and about how others have done that, and that can be incredibly helpful for folk. Um, but for me personally, I did never really read a book. I once went to hear a guy called Tom Peters, who was a sort of leadership guru. And I did also read that book, the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Can't remember who the author of that is. But usually, if I picked up things that were around, they kind of interpreted what I was natural. It's going to sound arrogant, and I don't mean it to be arrogant at all, but what I was sort of putting into practice and trying out without the academic literature, as it were, behind me, or without the kind of decision to follow a particular leadership style. Um, and in that sense, I've never been much interested in the theory of leadership at all. Um, I think the practice of leadership comes from your own inner sense of value and what you make of your own life and how you want to live that out in relation to others in society. And if you're driven by that, um, then your success factors will be related to that, really. And I don't think there's any one way of doing it. People have to work according to their own styles and personality, really.
So, what's the one thing that you wish you knew when you started out?
Uh, I think I was in a hurry, as you often are when you're young, and I wished I had realized that it takes a lot longer to make lasting change than you think, or to grow a business, to grow an organization. Because when you're younger, at least I felt that I was in a hurry. I wanted to achieve things quickly. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that energy, but you learn pace as you get older. And so knowing that real lasting change takes time would, I think, have been encouraging, and um, would perhaps have made me not feel quite so dispirited as I occasionally did when you hit roadblocks, you know. Um, I think that would I kind of change anything? I mean, what have I've kind of learned that it's also really just important to, I say this often, but to do what you love, because then you will love what you do. And when you get those difficult or dark times, um, when you think maybe your business isn't going to survive, or you have some major difficulties, whether it's with customers or with employees, or balancing home, family life, etc., then you kind of need something that will just reassure you that you can get through the difficulties and grow your own resilience. And I think I didn't know enough when I was younger how important it is to have those difficult times and to learn from your failures and to know that you can get through them. You know, most people can get through them if they ask for help, and if you stick with it when you're going through the difficulties. And the darkness will dissipate and the light will return. Um, and actually, that's a great learning experience. And you can't build a great business unless you do grind through that. You know, you can't be a better human being on your life's journey if you don't face up to the failures as much as enjoy the successes. But I wish I'd kind of had some reassurance about that. Or at least somebody having a companion along the way is good. I think what's much more expected and evident and readily available these days is coaching for employees, is mentoring for business mentors, is support groups, is a recognition that collaboration is a really good thing, and that lifelong learning, as we said earlier on, investing in your own learning, keeping your eyes and ears open all the time. That's much more a part of things in the 21st century than perhaps it was in the end of the 20th century, which is, after all, really when I was kind of in my mainstream leadership roles. Yeah, so a bit of knowledge of what it's going to look like is helpful.
I guess my final question, I know you're busy and you've got to head off. If you had just one piece of wisdom for local business owners and young budding
Mm.
entrepreneurs, what would that be?
Well, again, in the same way that I'm fond of saying, love what you do because it'll keep you going through the difficult times. I always say, lift as you climb. I.e., if you're going to grow your business, if you're going to get on in your career and you are successful, then don't become too self-centered and think about the people that are coming behind you to bring them with you, because no man is an island, to use another cliche. We all depend on others increasingly in this networked world. So investing in people, thinking about and supporting those that are coming after you, which is why I have, in all sorts of ways, given and continue to give advice and time and help, and to people who reach out, whether they accept it or not, irrelevant really. But the fact is, if they're open to that learning, it's good. And I just think you have an obligation or I feel an obligation anyway. It's a bit like the Damehood that we started with. A butcher's daughter from Moss Side does not grow up dreaming of damehood, I can tell you. But if it's conferred upon you, and there are only 600 or so living dames, as it were, in the UK currently, um, then I feel that a kind of part of that is to give back, is to use that to the benefit and help of other people, not just because you've got the title, but because actually supporting others, lifting as you have climbed, is it goes with the territory, and the least you can give is a bit of yourself and a bit of your time.
Thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure and an honor and a fantastic learning experience to speak with you. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, thanks for what you're doing, Christian, and honestly, best of luck with the Milton Keynes Business Channel and all you're doing. And hope to see you sometime.
Thank you ever so
Have
much.
a good
Have a
day.
lovely day. Thank you. Take care, Ed.
Bye.